Everyone, and welcome to the April CAPPO meeting. Should have been March, but that's okay. We had to postpone a little bit. No worries, it happens. Much better weather now than it is then. So, but I'm going to officially bring this meeting to order at 9:30 a.m. Just want to see. Okay. Just a little housekeeping thing. We're able to now, with the upgrade that we had from Microsoft Teams, no one has to formally fill out their sign-in sheets anymore. I'm able to extract that information directly from Microsoft Teams now. So everyone who's here will get credit for being here. And that'll, of course, be incorporated into the meeting minutes. So the first thing we have on our agenda is the approval of meeting minutes. I just this morning sent over a revision. There was like a small minor change that had to be done. So if we don't mind, I would if can't even talk today. I'm sorry. It might be the coffee. I would entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of January 23rd, 2024 as amended. Anyone? I just need someone to move it and second. Oh, Svetlana, thank you. I see it in the chat. And I just need someone to second.
I'll second, Laura.
Thanks, Laura. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, all those in favor, you can do so by raising your hand, putting it in the chat. Although I didn't do the poll, I could have done that today. I completely forgot. I was not prepared. Apologize. That works. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it. All righty, so let me just quickly check the participants because the next item on our agenda was an update from MHEC. I'm not sure. I know Janet's actually, I know they're not going to be on the call because there was an all-day training. So MHEC is going through some internal changes. So we are no longer going to have Janet Garbedian as our contact for MHEC. Hopefully at the next meeting, we will have our new rep, who is Lindsay Dutcher. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly, but I will send over her contact once I receive it. I'll probably put it in like the CAPPO newsletter so that way, if you have any questions with MHEC and any of the contracts that they have upcoming, you can reach out to her directly. But it's my understanding that she's now taking over the K through 12 and the municipalities. So she'll be the contact person moving forward. And then Janet's going to go back to being the contact for higher ed. So yeah, so that's my update on MHEC. And then now we can go to our OSD update with Patricia Burke.
Thank you so much, Jen, and good morning, everybody. I just put in the chat the meeting notes that I'll be presenting. For the simple fact, there's a lot of links there. So if you're interested in anything I have to say, please click over and find additional details. So just 5 quick updates. Again, super excited. MassBuys is 1 week away, 1 week and 2 days, I guess, May 2nd. So that's coming up right around the corner. If you've not had a chance to register, please consider attending. It's a 1-day. There are no fees associated with the event, and it's a great opportunity for you to network, to meet your OSD, whether they be contract managers, myself and my colleagues, and the vendors, most importantly. We have hundreds of vendors that will be there. So these are vendors that are vetted and on contract, opportunity for you to learn more about, their goods and services. So we look forward to seeing you there, hopefully. Also, in the past 30 days, we've announced that the OSD trades contracts will be reopening this year. So this is so exciting. We're leading with the 2 of the larger categories, if you will. We've got TRD 01 and 03, which will be reopening in May, with TRD 02 and 04 expected to follow. So if you're not familiar with these are trades agreements that support, if I have my facts correctly, I believe it's 29 different skilled trades. So particularly helpful for those of you who are managing small projects, to have a list of local qualified vendors that are skilled and expert at that type of work. So we encourage you, if your favorite local vendors are not on these contracts for any reason, please, I've provided a link where provides your vendor with complete information on how they can engage with OSD to respond to these upcoming RFRs as they will be released. So 01 and 03 will be released in May. The RFRs with TRD 02 and 03, Jen, that same coffee problem. I'm not talking well. TRD02 and 04 are expected for early fall, likely in the September timeframe. So keep an eye out if that's of interest to you. For those of you who are Combis users, first of all, we appreciate you always giving me those contracts and that tool an opportunity. We've recently made some small enhancements. We continue to try to refine and improve that tool, but of particular note this morning are the punch out categories or catalogs, excuse me. So for those buyers who are looking for those commodity purchasing, pick and ship items from very familiar vendors across 13 different contracts, those lists are now in the drop-down form in alphabetical order, mercifully. So I'm very happy to see that. Jen picked up on that the other day. She's like, yes, finally, they're in alphabetical order. And there was historic rhyme or reason to that. Those were, the list always appeared in sequential order based upon when the vendor joined the program. So you can imagine vendor number one at the top of the list may not have been overly interested in reorganizing it, right? But it is now in alphabetical order, so much easier for you to use. And again, these catalogs, there are 35 in number. They span 13 contracts, and it will help to ensure that all of your statewide contract pricing is truly being extended, terms and benefits of the contracts, protections against price surges, fees, surcharges. Free shipping is available from most vendors, and many vendors also offer in-store pickup options. So it's really a good resource pool for you if that's within your realm of responsibility. Just a reminder, so OSD, we also have available under OFF 48 are the Commonwealth print services and mailing services available to you. So this is a time of year for annual reports, county billing, newsletters, brochures, etc. So again, just another resource to consider. And if that's of interest to you, the contract there is OFF 48, and your request for quotes can be made to cpms@mass.gov. And the last is our environmental message, just to let you know our annual report has been published. There's a link in the chat where to find the report, but significant gains have been made in the Commonwealth's efforts. In FY23, calculated EPP spend was over $327 million, which includes diverting an estimated 105,000 tons of waste to recycling. So that was really great. $3.5 million in annual savings from energy efficient choices and a reduction of 78,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. You can tell I'm reading this because it's not my core expertise, but I'm happy to share that data for those of you who are keenly interested, and hopefully most of us are interested. So that's it for me. I'm Trish Burke. I'm with the local government team at OSD. Y'all should have my contact information, but if not, I'm on this meeting thread, so please reach out. Happy to be of service to you. Thanks, Jen.
No problem. All right. Okay. So thanks so much, Trish. Appreciate it. Very excited for next week. I think I mentioned that. All right. So now, without further ado, we're going to have our presentation from the Attorney General's office. Deb is here, our familiar face, but we have some new faces that'll be nice to kind of get a little introduction for with this group. So feel free to introduce your team, and then when you're ready to start the presentation, we can go ahead and do that.
Oh, great. Thanks, Jen. Yes, as Jen mentioned, I do know most, if not all, of the participants that are on this call. I am one of the 3 attorneys general that handle construction bid matters, both protests as well as we advise awarding authorities, contractors, a whole host of people on what has to be done in order to comply with the construction bid laws. And that also includes the design laws as well. So let me just introduce 2 people, our newest members of the in the bid unit. The first one, I think many of you already know, Justin Polk. Justin came on board. He was working in another area of the Attorney General's office, and he came on board with the unit about a year ago. And then the newest member, happy to say, is Shannon Leland. And yeah, there she is. Again, I'm very happy to say that she was in another portion of the Attorney General's office. So, once again, we're winning over all those people who just can't wait to deal with construction bidding. Let me just highlight what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Our workforce participation goals. Justin's going to handle that. That's not MWBE. We try to make this point every time we speak to people. Proprietary specs, that'll be me. Always a fraught area. The Brazi decision, which is public-private construction, and that will be Justin. Justin will also talk briefly about the Baltazar case. In that case, it's a court case, and it has a lot of impact on whether or not you've actually advertised the procurement properly. Shannon is going to next take the Patrica court case, and that's very important because it tells you when you can reject bids and rebid the bids. We deal with this almost on a daily basis. Finally, I've got two quick things. One is the pump station exemptions, which somebody had mentioned, and the other one is to talk about restrictions when a filed subbidder restricts his bid either to a specific GC or GCs as opposed to from the GCs. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Justin. And Justin, are you doing the advancing the slides?
Yes, I'll be taking that away. So thank you,
Okay.
Deb. Let me just see if this present in Teams function works. If not, I can share my screen. I don't know if anyone can see anything yet.
Not yet.
Wait, I just got like a little bit of a prompt here. Present.
I need to do something.
It might be.
Nope, it's going.
Look at that. Awesome.
Yay.
Love it when technology works. So is this
Love
full
it.
screen for everybody?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as Deb mentioned, my name is Justin Polk. I'm an assistant attorney general here at the bid unit. So I will be taking the first section of the presentation, which applies to workforce participation goals in the Commonwealth. And so as the slide says, we're going to be talking about basically the why and the how as it pertains to workforce participation goals. So the workforce participation goal requirement comes from Chapter 149, Section 44A2G. And it says all contracts by a state agency or state assisted contracts for design, construction, reconstruction, installation, demolition, maintenance, or repair must contain workforce participation goals for minorities and for women. So what does that mean? So WMBE goals refer to businesses. So when we talk about the WMBE goals that you hear, those are looking at who owns the business. Workforce participation goals refer to the workforce. They look at individual workers and the makeup of a particular contractor's workforce. So there are two separate requirements that are completely independent of each other. And we get a lot of confusion in the bid unit from contractors or awarding authorities who think that they put the appropriate requirements into their bid documents. And when we say, well, where's your workforce participation goals, they point us to the MBE. So it's very important that we make the distinction between these separate requirements. So the state mandated workforce participation goals, there's a link here where you can find them, administrative bulletin from ANF, 6.9% for women, 15.3% for minorities or persons of color. And so so again, these are the goals that should be making up the workforce on a particular project. This is what the contractor should be striving to achieve. And so the history of the workforce participation goals. So Chapter 280 of the Act of 1998 created the requirement. And then you see that there was a bulletin, an ANF administrative bulletin in 2009 that actually established the goals. And then you see Chapter 462 of the Act of 2012 that actually codified these requirements in 44A2G. And so what qualifies as a state-assisted contract? So it's a construction project undertaken by basically a political subdivision or agency of the Commonwealth for the purposes of planning, acquisition, design, construction, demolition, installation, repair, or maintenance of a capital facility or public work. whose costs are funded in part or in whole by the Commonwealth. So basically looking at whether this is a project kind of by the Commonwealth or is the Commonwealth providing money to fund this particular project. Either way, the requirements of the workforce participation goals would apply. And so here's some examples of some state-assisted, common state-assisted contracts. So you've got the Massachusetts School Building Authority, you've got contracts by the Board of Library Commissioners, you've got contracts by the Department of Transportation, and you have your regional 911 contracts. Just honing in a little bit on on the Massachusetts School Building Authority requirements, you see that they have specific, and we don't have to get into the kind of nitty-gritty of each of these types of contracts, but you see that they have specific contractual provisions for various types of contracts. So you see design contracts usually has a section 17.10 in there that says that the designer will be required to provide the regular reports regarding the gender and race and ethnicity of employees working on the project. You see the OPM has its own requirements in its contract. And then when you look at the project scope and funding, you see that there's additional requirements pursuant to MSBA's requirements. So a lot of information in there specific to MSBA, but we don't have to get into the weeds on that. So bid and contract requirements for workforce participation goals. The bid document should include a reference to the goals that will be contained in the contract. What must these contracts include in addition to the goals? So that they have to include the processes and procedures. And this is another point that that I think that a lot of awarding authorities miss, and we actually have a bid protest currently about this issue. You don't just put in what the goals are in your bid documents, in your contract documents. You actually have to put in procedures and for reporting and enforcement. So how are you going to hold your contractors accountable for making attempts to achieve these goals? A lot of times awarding authorities will put in just the goals themselves and think that's the end of it. But no, there should be some follow-up. There should be some accountability on the part of the contractor, of the awardee, to make sure that they are actually working towards these goals. And you'll see that that requirement is again in 44A2G. What happens if the bid contract does not contain these requirements? So if it's the bid documents, then they should be revised to include the requirements if it's a if the contract hasn't been executed. So you might do that via addendum or what have you. Any contract that is included in the bid documents that does not comply with the requirements is subject to a bid protest and a rebid. And as I said, we have a current bid protest now dealing with this issue. So this is kind of a live matter before the bid unit. So just a good thing to keep in mind, though, and when you're designing your contract documents and you're designing your bid documents, you want to make sure that you have you pay attention to the 44A2G and the requirement that that you have these goals in there and the compliance procedures and reporting procedures as well. So I think that takes care of the workforce participation goals, and now we're going to move on to the proprietary specifications law. And Deb, were you handling that, or was I handling that? I can't remember.
No, I'm handling it, Justin. Great. Okay, if you put up the first slide. Okay, so when we're talking about proprietary specifications, I'm sure you're all well aware that there are certain rules you have to follow if, in fact, you want to restrict the products or the systems that the awarding authority will use during the course of construction. So let's see, I have the site right there. It is Chapter 30, Section 39M. The usual rule is that you have to provide for open competition for certain items. And however, if the awarding authority wants to include a named product, they have to do a couple of things. First, the awarding authority should make some sort of investigation and see whether or not it's justified to name a product or products that will meet the specs. Then you have to somehow memorialize that, okay, the results of your investigation. So you should have it somewhere in your files, in your procurement files, whatever your local process is. And also, it must be given in writing the reason that is what they're requesting in terms of whether or not it should be a proprietary spec or not. Okay, and then the next thing, the general rule is the specs must provide at least 3 named brands of material or a description of material, which can be met by at least 3 manufacturers, and allow equals to be proposed for any of the named or described materials. Now, the thing that you should think about is that, let's say you don't actually name a particular product in your specs, but it usually, becomes apparent at some point in time that yes, in fact, the awarding authority had a specific product in mind, even though they don't name it, and you would fall under the same requirements in that case as well. So the next thing is that you allow for equals, in other words, substitute products or systems to be proposed by the contractor. Okay, next slide, Justin. Okay, and sorry, somebody say?
I was going to say,
We're all set.
I have you on the equal slide.
Right. Yeah, okay. So on the equal side, or equal, and the main thing you have to remember is that the awarding authority cannot ask bidders to identify what their proposed substitutes are as a matter of bid responsiveness. I know it seems a little counterintuitive, but the law does say that the awarding authority cannot base the rejection of a bid on the products, because what the bidder has to be is a responsible bidder, right? Skill, integrity, ability, all of that. If you're talking about the product, if you require the naming of a product, that really isn't something that should be looked at when you're reviewing the bids. And in fact, what the law says is that you have to award the contract, and then after the award, you consider the proposed substitution. And we have a statutory definition of equal in quality, durability, appearance, strength, and design, equal functionality, and conforms substantially, even with deviations, to the detailed requirements for the item in the said specs. Okay, next slide. I guess that's it. Yeah, just as I say, just do your homework in terms of dotting your I's and crossing your T's. I do see we all see from time to time that there might be a particular spec that is basically, somebody just picks it up and copies another spec. We see that a lot, and we have to be on guard for that as well. Okay, I think Brazzi is you once again, Justin.
Yes, thanks, Deb. Deb has has very humorously dubbed me the Brazzi guy, so I will be taking Brazzi. I handle a lot of these cases that come before the bid unit. Very important case for determining whether the bid laws apply to projects that have both public and private elements. So let's take a look at Brazzi. So a little bit about the background of Brazzi. Brazzi involved the construction of a new student dormitory on the campus of the University of Mass Lowell campus. The project was to be constructed on private land, and the university was supposed to lease the property from the Brazzi Development Corporation. And in that case, the Brazzi court found that the lease was actually a contract for construction of a building by a public agency. And so why did the court do that? Let's take a little bit of a dive into that. So in making that determination, the court looked at a number of factors. And you'll see the citation there, Brazzi has 697 and 98 that lists all the factors. And this was a totality of the circumstances analysis, basically looking at the nature of the lease itself and the RFP that was initially issued, and trying to determine whether or not this project was really a construction project by the university in disguise. And so some of the things that the court looked at or announced, I should say, as factors that might be relevant are whether or not the agency kind of owned the land and then sold it or leased it to a private party, whether the source of money is public funds. Ironically, the Brazzi court didn't have any information about the source of funding in front of it, so it found actually that the project was a public construction project without even knowing the source of fund. All the other factors were sufficient to make the determination. But again, the length of the proposed lease, including any extensions, the extent of control retained by the agency, whether the payments that the awarding authority makes under the lease are covering the cost of construction, whether the agency can retain the option to purchase the property at the end of the lease, whether the agency had the building constructed and then leased it, and whether the facility is of such a specialized nature that it really wouldn't have any other suitable commercial purpose without significant renovations. So that's what the court looked at in determining whether or not the lease contract was actually a contract for public construction. And so how does the bid unit apply the Brazzi case? So our interpretation of Brazzi is not limited to the context of leases as for public construction. So we use Brazzi within a multitude of contexts that have kind of public-private elements. Most recently, I think, Deb, we've seen a couple of cases involving licenses and how do licenses interact with Brazzi and with awarding authorities for the public-private analysis. And like I said, here we refer to this analysis in most instances in which there's a question of whether or not a project is public or private. The Brazzi factors are non-exclusive. And so, we look at other things as well, depending on the circumstances that might be relevant. So like I said, in the context of a license, there might be certain factors that we look at. But we don't look at just the factors that were enumerated in Brazzi. As we said, it's a totality of the circumstances. An important quote from Brazzi that I thought was relevant. The statute does not distinguish between buildings that the public agency will own and buildings that a public agency will lease. Rather, it focuses on the creation of a project by the agency for the agency's use in carrying out its public purpose. And I think that's really kind of the guiding message of Brazzi, is that, in setting forth a set of non-exclusive factors, you're looking at the totality of circumstances. You really want to get to what the heart of the project is. Is it a project created by the agency for the agency's use in carrying out its public purpose? If it's not doing that, then the bid laws probably do not apply. And so, when we see a lot of these project that have public pieces and private pieces, is this really a project that just basically, you're renting a public building, but you're really furthering your own private enterprise? Bid laws might not actually apply. You really want to make sure that there's a public purpose being furthered when you're applying the bid laws. Recent decisions involving Brazzi. So as you can see, we've had 3, I think, in the last couple of years, one being last year. Interesting enough, all of our most recent formal decisions have been, the protester has been Foundation for Fair Contracting of Massachusetts. I think they were actually a amicus in the original Brazzi decision as well. But as you can see, this is a live issue for the bid unit, especially the last one. This last one involved whether or not a private foundation created by a public community college would be its construction activities, whether or not it would have been covered by the bid laws. And again, we found with the Brazzi analysis that the private foundation, even though by statute it was not a agency of the Commonwealth, it was it was not a public college. It was a separate private foundation, but in that opinion, we found that it was acting as the agent of the public entity. And again, you see that even in that context, the public bid laws could apply. So there's a lot of layers, which makes Brazzi, I think, a very interesting case to know and read. Important thing to know what Brazzi does not say. And there can be some confusion amongst awarding authorities out there about the contours of Brazzi and what exactly Brazzi is saying. Brazzi does not say that the source of funding controls whether or not a public construction bid, the bid laws apply. It does not say that, whether the land is public or private controls. And it also does not say that any one factor outweighs another. Again, it's a totality of the circumstances analysis. So we look at the whole project, we look at all the factors and weigh that balance in determining whether or not a project is public or private. Exemptions from BRASI. So there are instances when a public-private project would not undergo the BRASI analysis because another statute has said that the bid laws simply don't apply. And, one of those is Chapter 121B, Section 34, which exempts certain projects that are part of the low-income housing tax credit program, where you use a private investor. Those type of projects would be excluded from the bid laws. And you see we had a recent decision there. I think Deb wrote that decision March 1st, 2024, Greenwood Industries versus Cambridge Housing Authority. So again, BRASI is still a live issue. Still get a lot of cases involving public-private issues. So it's just a good case to know and to understand. Baltazar, I think this is me as well. So Baltazar is another interesting case, very important within the context of public bidding. It's an appeals court case from 2006. And Baltazar involved a sewer improvement project in the town of Lunenburg. This project was bid pursuant to 3039M. And then Baltazar was, of course, the low bidder and was awarded the project. But afterwards, I think it was their local DOT informed the town that, or I think it was the state DOT informed the town that the project had not been properly advertised. Specifically, they didn't advertise in a local newspaper pursuant to 149, Section 44J. And so that was a violation of the bid laws, and specifically the advertising laws. And so the project was rebid and Baltazar lost, and then it sought to seek its contractual damages for the rescission of its contract with the town. And so the court rejected Baltazar's claims and basically said, and I think this is kind of the most important thing that you can take away from Baltazar, was that in its view, 44J, Section 44J, the advertising section of the bid laws, was a mandatory statute, a violation of which required a rebid of the contract, and any contract resulting from a flawed bid, a bid that was not properly advertised, would be void. So having no effect. And that's big, because that essentially says that if your work has begun in your project, you can't pay your contractors, you can't pay them for the work that's been done. The contract is void. And it states in the opinion, even if a statute does not expressly provide that a contract made in violations of its terms is invalid, the contract will be deemed void if doing so is necessary to accomplish the statute's objectives. And that's Baltazar at 721. And so, again, notably, the court found that Baltazar was unable to recover damages from the town in contract or in equity. So they said that even though we're voiding the contract and you can't even recover quantum merit for the work that you performed on that. So Baltazar applied, what should awarding authorities be doing with this knowledge? Awarding authorities must ensure that when they advertise their projects that are governed by 44A through J or 3039M, that they fully comply with 44J. Contractors may not be compensated for work performed under a contract made in violation of advertising requirements. Your contract can be declared void upon challenge. The bid unit wouldn't be doing that. That's definitely a court challenge. But again, if you have a project and you haven't properly advertised, and a motivated bidder could sue in Superior Court, and we've almost gotten close to that this year. So it's another one of those kind of important live issues. Particular attention should be paid to prevailing wage and ensuring that the applicable prevailing wage is appropriately referenced where required, because the reference to a prevailing wage is kind of one of those things that's folded into 44J. So if your project does not reference the prevailing wage when it should, that could be a 44J violation that could end up causing problems for your contract. And as I already stated, A number of challenges to public bids have come before us in recent months regarding Baltazar and 44J, and we frequently order the rebid of contracts for our projects that have been found in violation. So in order to avoid the mess of having to rebid when you have a project already underway, it's best just to make sure that you're getting, all of your advertising requirements out in front and making sure that you're complying with 44J where necessary. Patricia, I think that's going to be Shannon.
Morning, everybody. Thank you, Justin. My name is Shannon Leland again. I'm new to the bid unit. I'm not very new to the AG's office, and I'm not new to the construction world, but I am new to the bid unit to be here. I would like to focus attention on this Patricia case. It's critical in terms of when a jurisdiction can rebid a project. It's a Mass Appeals Court case from 1994, and it confirms that the circumstances in which a jurisdiction can rebid a project are in fact narrow. So I'll give a little brief factual background. A highway department wanted to put a project out for bid. There were 5 bidders. Patricia fell in the middle, 2 higher and 2 lower than Patricia's. The 2 lower bids, however, each had some kind of defect. One had a math error and the other one had a pricing issue. And so those 2 bids, even though they were lower and they had, because they had these defects, they had to be rejected. And that left Patricia now as the lowest eligible bidder, even though there were previously 2 lower ones. So the award to Patricia, and then there was a whole series of litigation steps that ensued, first to the Department of Labor, then to the trial court, then to the single justice of the appeals court, and then to the full panel of the appeals court. I won't bore you with all those details, but instead I will cut to the chase. The construction started, and the issue on appeal was, can a jurisdiction, quote, attempt to recapture the benefit of a lower bid that was properly rejected for noncompliance with bidding procedures? Basically, is the public interest sufficient to reject and rebid in order to bring the cost to the jurisdiction down? And the answer was a resounding no. So the purposes, the bird's eye view, which is where we should all start on these things, is what are the purposes of the bidding laws? It's to establish an open and honest procedure for competition between bidders who are on equal footing. The companion goal is to assure that the awarding authority obtains the lowest price among responsible contractors. And obviously, or not obviously, these 2 purposes can sometimes collide, and that was the circumstance here. So the resounding no came in a little bit more of a verbose way. The answer is that the awarding authority may not reject a bid simply to obtain a lower price. And that's for 2 reasons. Number one is it subverts the equal footing notion by exposing secret bid prices, which allows subsequent bids to kind of undercut price-wise. So a rebidder would know the numbers of the initial bid and can to beat those numbers, so that the undercutting and equal footing goal is undermined. And it also provides a means for an awarding authority to favor certain bidders. It can just rebid until the preferred contractor ends up being the lowest. And so both of those are against the purposes of the overarching purpose, the bidding laws. So the court was clear that the awarding authority may only reject a bid, and there's abusive process, which is not on this slide, but that's kind of its own category, or focusing on the bids themselves, if there's insufficient funds for the GC's bid, if the specifications are ambiguous, or 3, if there are new specifications. Those are the times when rejection and rebid is allowable and proper. It is not appropriate to reject and rebid to get a lower price. It is not appropriate to reject and rebid to avoid delay, to avoid litigation, or for any other purpose. Slide, please. And a jurisdiction can't bypass this Patricia limitation by saying in its invitation that we reserve we reserve the right to reject all bids and rebid if we feel like it, or some other maybe more formal language. That's inappropriate and it's meaningless. It's no different from contracting around any other statute. For example, I can't contract with my employees to pay them less than minimum wage. So this is kind of the same thing. You can't contract around the law. And so reserving the right to reject and rebid carries no impact whatsoever. The Patricia standard remains. And as Justin mentioned, these are this is also a live issue. And so we get these cases on the regular. The Baltazar case that Justin spoke about was in 2023. There's a Jupiter matter, also 2023. There's a Rochester from 2022, and those are all available at the bid unit decision bank, which the web address was in a prior slide. Next one, Justin. So the concurrence, I really enjoyed the concurrence. Essentially, when a decision is written by the court, some of the justices can join and basically say, I reached the same result, but I have something else to say. And so those concurrences often have some nuggets, and this particular concurrence does. And I think it's words to the wise. It says litigation should be the last resort, not the first option. And rational thought and wise counseling are available at a far less expense than litigation. So pay attention to Patricia and understand that there's only three concrete reasons and legitimate reasons to reject a bid.
Okay, I guess at this point in time, I'll touch briefly on the whole issue of pump station exemptions. Next slide, Justin. Okay, so the pump station has a long history in terms of the actual statute being enacted. Goes back to a court case, which the legislature said, no, we don't agree with that, so they passed this new law. And there are two different aspects of a pump station. One is the design in terms of whether or not it's a building project. And the other is whether or not the construction bid itself has to comply with those requirements. So here we have under 7C, which is a designer selection law, section 1, it defines a building project as a capital facility project undertaken for the planning, acquisition, design, construction, demolition, installation, repair, or maintenance of any building and appurtenant structures, facilities, and utilities. Appurtenant structures or buildings which are required to be constructed as integral parts of the development of a sewer, water, or highway system is not subject to the designer selection law. Okay, so there's that exemption there. And then when we look at the pump station exemption as it is applied to construction, it does have to be, and this is the important part, it does have to be a pump station to be constructed. And the issue there is this exemption under the bid laws does not apply if what you're doing is repairing a pump station, something of that sort, but it can't be an existing pump station. Okay, next slide, Justin. Okay, well, moving quickly, the next one is restricted filed subbids. And as you no doubt know, filed subbidders may contain restrictions in their bids. And there is a difference between restrictions to a specified general contractor or contractors and restrictions from a specified GC or GCs. If the restriction is from a GC bidder, an awarding authority is not able to give the filed sub-bid work to the general contractor bidders. And what that means, if all the filed subs say, we don't want to work with contractor X, what happens is contractor X, as a GC, simply cannot bid. I sometimes get questions about, well, how about if the GC just performed the work of the trade himself? And that doesn't work, because that GC, even though we might have a division of the company that actually does the filed sub work, if he wanted to use his own employees for that trade, he would have had to put in a bid for that trade work. So that's the story with restrictions from. Okay, on the other hand, if the only restrictions that you have is to a general contractor or contractors, then the work is given to the GC bidders. Okay, next slide, Justin.
That's the end of our presentation, Deb.
Yeah, okay, just wanted to point that out. We've got 3 people here in the bid unit, thank God. And, the important thing to remember is that, please, for any issue, please reach out to any of us, any of the 3 of us. I would say about 90% of our work, and Justin and Shannon, you may want to chime in on this also, 90% of our work is trying to avoid protests, avoid actually having a hearing. Okay, so we are on the phone constantly, and we're also looking at, helping people via email. And what I always say is, let's say you call me and pose me a question, and I say, well, okay, here it is. This is what the law says. When I put in that answer, that reply, I also say, how about, if you want, you can send me an email that describes what our conversation was. In other words, I'm looking for what is the understanding of the caller in terms of what we discussed. And then you can send it in to me. I can say, okay, that's fine, or make this little little change to the language, and then you put it in your procurement file. So you have that tool available to you. Jen, I don't know if we have time for questions.
We do, absolutely.
Oh, okay. Anyone have any questions for any of us, the 3 of us?
For any of the topics that we had? Might have to unmute yourself or. I know.
No questions. Great.
It's always a good thing, right? They'll call.
Absolutely.
They'll call and email.
Not a
like I do.
problem. Yeah. Okay.
All
Well,
right. Anyone?
I guess
No?
that's it then.
All right. Well,
Okay.
thanks. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was absolutely wonderful. I'm probably going to go back and watch it again because there was a lot of great information in there. So I really appreciate your time today
Of course.
and
Yeah.
doing that for us. No, it was
Okay.
great. Awesome. Well, you guys have a
Thank
great
you.
day. I don't want to keep you for the rest of the meeting as we do
Okay.
the rest of
Bye-bye
the
Thank you
now.
very much.
It was great meeting you. Bye. All righty. All right, so just continuing on. Sorry, of course, I was multitasking here. All right, so I believe next on the agenda is just the county bid update. So right now, our fall bids are all completed, thank goodness. Everything's available on the county website, so the trades are updated, the road contracts are out, everything's done, completed, executed, so you can obtain copies, or if you need any of the pricing sheets and information, you can obtain that directly on the county website. Then right now, currently out to bid, we have the elevator maintenance, heating fuel oil, gasoline, diesel, the copy paper, and water chemicals. Those are all currently out to bid. The important one, for those of you that participate in the heating fuel and the gasoline and diesel, is on May 1st. We have the bid opening at 11, and anyone that's going to be getting fixed gallons. Obviously, I'll be sending out instructions and forms that morning as I've done in previous years. But that decision and that kind of lock in has to be done by 2 o'clock that day. We've had pretty good success in the past, you know, as far as getting that information over to the vendor. So hopefully we can make it another seamless process again. I believe tomorrow, not that anyone has to, yeah. No. Thursday. I'm already losing my days this week. Thursday, I do have a pre-bid meeting for anyone on the fuel contracts. So that way, if the vendors, if we happen to get a new one, that maybe it can be kind of a bit of a confusing process, just so that way we can answer any questions and kind of clarify that. It's optional for the towns. You don't have to attend. I will likely record it so that way, if anyone is unable to attend and you know, wants to see what transpired, we can do that. I mean, that's the benefit of having the technology. And so other than that, once those bids are completed, and hopefully after I finish up our county internal ARPA projects, I am going to be looking at seeing what new ones we can incorporate for the collective purchasing. So be on the lookout. Probably this summer, I'll probably put out another survey, as I did a couple of years back prior to ARPA. That ended up taking a lot of my time, just to see kind of what's out there and what folks want to do collectively, so that we can kind of add a few more and take some of those maybe off of your plate, and do something, you know, a little bit more efficiently. So other than that, that's all I have for an update. Do you have any questions or anything that anyone wants to bring up? I'll be putting together the newsletter this week with a formal update and the materials from today's meeting and the recording, and everything like that. So that way, you know, everyone has that info in case you want to watch it again, as I'll probably, like I said, I'll be definitely doing. It was great. But other than that, if no one has anything, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. I think everyone's muted at the moment, so.
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Peggy. Do I have a second?
It's Amber Patterson, and I'll second the motion.
Thanks, Amber. All right, all those in favor, raise your hand or say yes. Great. Thanks, everyone. So the meeting is adjourned at 10:22.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Everyone have a great day.